Hello, it's Amy with Just a Little Ink. I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! Now in my 23rd year of this wonderful adventure of creativity. And so today I'm wanting to share with you a project that I'd come up with recently that will make a great table favor for your Thanksgiving meal, or maybe you just have maybe a friend's giving kind of gathering. Maybe you just want some fall decor for your dinner party. But I think this will be great. I'm going to go ahead and flip my camera over and share what that looks like. It's a maple leaf using and it's made in a little box that will sit at your table setting. You can put a little bag inside here, or maybe just some treats, little dinner favors, little mints, kind of up to you, kind of what you'd want to stick into there. It uses the Gathering Moments bundle, which comes with a red rubber, one of the last ones Stampin' Up's going to come out with, a red rubber stamp set, and coordinating die set. And then it's also available in a suite called Gathering Together, which also includes the Gathering Leaves embossing folder, which I'm going to share some ideas with that as well. And it also comes with twine, early espresso. I should have grabbed it off of my other table. Early espresso and old olive twine, and some Cajun craze gems that are just beautiful. And so all of those things could be used in addition. I am choosing, because I'm using a Cajun craze maple leaf, I'm going to just use some of our linen thread. And so I'm going to go ahead and put my picture going on all of this and kind of just get started with the things that you will need if you're going to make this project. So I have got a number of items here. And again, it'll matter whether or not you are choosing to do it exactly like I've done in my original sample, or if you're going to do something different. So I have used a piece of that Gathering Together Designer Series paper. It's a 12 by 12 pack of Designer Series papers, and they are in beautiful prints. This is one of them, of course, and there's gold in them. So it's a specialty Designer Series paper. And then I've got another option. We're going to get a chance here that's got another print, if you can kind of see that, and again the gold foil into that. Then grab some other pieces. It's not new because these are online exclusives that have been out for a month or so, maybe a couple months. This is September. It's been out about a month, and yet demonstrators have been able to order this a month previous to that. So you may have seen these. So I'm going to grab those, and I think I've got one more page. Yes. So then this is the last print. Some really beautiful prints. I'm a person who just loves fall, and so I'm going to go ahead and set this kind of up above. Well, maybe we'll set it over here. You may or may not see it when I get all my things in the way, but here we go. So I'm going to kind of start off with just the box. And I like to put together a template when I'm doing boxes. I start out when I'm creating and getting an idea just using scrap paper. So other pieces, maybe you've got some junk mail you want to cut down. And then I'll use retired paper. So that's what this is made out of, some retired cardstock, to kind of make a template. And I mark it and I have all my measurements on here. That kind of just helps me. And so I'm going to grab out my paper trimmer. You could also choose to use, and this is going to get in the way, you could also choose to use our scoring, our Simply Scored tool, which I really like. I like that for scoring more than anything. So I'm going to go ahead. This piece of paper is cut. So the Designer Series paper is cut at 8.5 by 3 1/8 inches. And I'm going to turn it on the long side, so the short is at the top rail. And I'm going to score over at 1 inch. And I want the part I want to see facing me. And I don't want to use my dark blade because that's going to cut. I want the lighter blade, which is my scoring blade. And with designer paper, you don't want to push too hard because you can cut it if you do. Then I'm going to turn it, and I am going to need my extra arm out here. And I am going to start scoring at 1 inch. Put this down. At 1 inch, at 3 3/4 of an inch, at 4 3/4 of an inch, and at 7 1/2 inches. And then I can put my tool away. We'll probably pull it out again because I want to share another option with this. So when I've done that, it's almost easier with designer series paper then to go ahead and fold so that you can see before you make your cuts. So I'm going to fold all these things along my score lines. And again, that lower score line. And I designed this to be sized in such a way that my maple leaf fits right at the, so that it's not hanging above too much. Okay, so I've got all my pieces here. I'm going to go ahead, and this little corner here, I'm going to actually cut out. And I might find it easier, to come here. So I'm going to come along my score lines, and I'm going to cut out this lower corner. Okay. And then I've got some lines coming across, and again, I'm finding it easier to do it on this opposite side. So I've got some, you want to cut up to the lower score line. And then I'm going to come here and come and grab here. So then the other thing I found is helpful, and if you've seen anyone else who does boxes, you'll know this to be true. You want to come in, especially on these little tabs, and you want to kind of angle up just a little bit, just so that they don't bind up when you're folding things in. So I'm just going to cut just a sliver in, cut in fabric sewing. You do that so that your curves don't bunch up. And so it's a similar concept. So I'm going to put my scissors away, kind of throw that on to the side. Then I can go ahead and fold all these things in. And I could use my bone folder if I wanted. I just want to make sure that these little tabs stay on the inside. So I'm going to fold stuff across. And then I want that to stay in the side. And so what I've got now is a box, and I may go ahead and just pinch those a little. So let me go ahead. I'm going to grab my bone folder just so I know that my sides specifically are nice and crisp. Don't want a floppy box. So then I'm going to grab my multi-purpose liquid glue, because for me that makes just the easiest way of putting all of this together. So I'm going to grab my parts here, I'm going to slide them over. I want that to come in. Okay, so I'm going to grab and put a little bit of glue on this outside flap. And I don't need a lot, I just need a little, just to make sure that that's secure on the edge. And so it's going to kind of hold it. Because I'm using designer series paper, it's a lot easier in a lot of ways. You could do this box with cardstock. And then I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive then on this flap. This is the lowest flap. So a little bit of glue across the sides and a little bit across the bottom. Then I'm going to hold my box, making sure all of those pieces stay nice flat. Goes together really pretty fast. So got that like so. And then the box is done. That is the box. So we can set it aside, and I want to show kind of how I did everything else. So you have some options. I have somewhere shoved, oh, I put up my needle, and I can share with these. I bought some thicker needles for embroidery on Amazon, and they came with a whole little vial of needles in different sizes and widths of the eye, and a couple threaders. And so if you're going to stitch, you might find this to be quite helpful. I'll link that into the description of the video. And then I'm going to grab out my linen thread here. You need about 50 inches of linen thread if you're going to be stitching. And so I'm just going to grab a nice long section of thread, probably longer than I need. And the stitching really does take a little bit of time. You're going to want to think that through. You can go ahead and use the threader if threading an eye is not your thing. And so that was where some of these come in handy. It's a big eye, so normally it's not the problem. But the older my eyes get, well, I did that and then I'm not even thinking straight. Just through here, throw my eye in there, put my loop through it. Well, maybe. All right, and then I'll pull it through. Tells you I don't normally use threaders. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and just get a nice long thread on this other side. Okay, so what I opted for on this was to start at the top and work my way. Let me poke that through. I'm going to start at the top. You really just need to be methodical with however it is. Kind of see if I can get this to start focusing. So what you want to do is come in, make sure you kind of hold this other end initially. So have a little bit of a thread on, or a tail, excuse me, on this back side. Kind of hold it so that it doesn't go flying all over the place. And you're going to kind of stitch in what's referred to as back stitching. So you're going to think through. And I'm not going to stitch all the way on this one just because I want to kind of share some other ideas of what you can do, as it's time consuming and I don't think most people really want to watch. Okay, grab all those pieces. You got to kind of keep your loops out of the way. So I've come down, then I went one below the part I want to go, and then I'm going back in. And I'm going to keep that concept going and just be careful again with all of those loops because they want to get caught up everywhere. And I got myself a little bit of a knot because of course I'm on camera. Why not? There we go. So it's just going to be a constant of all of that. And then you want to come and grab places like here so you're not having too much of an area on the back side that you're traveling with. Now you could choose, it would be easier in some ways, to have a shorter length of thread. But if you do, you're going to be joining more as you go. And so you just kind of just work it through. Kind of be careful with how you're going. I'm going to go just a little bit longer on this. And then I'm going to come to the next one. And you can kind of see how it starts to go. Now, if you do it this way and you're stitching, you're going to want to have an extra maple leaf that is not stitched, doesn't have the holes in it, to back the back side of your maple so that you don't see all these stitches when you're having it at your table. So I'm going to just keep going here, and I'll kind of show how I start and then on these other sides. So then I would come actually up to the very top. And then I'll work my way down. And so when you get through all of this, keeping my tail of my leaf out of the way, again, it's kind of a matter of managing that loop everywhere you go. And so then again, I'm going to go below. I just finished here. I'm going to come below so that I can come back in. A common, again, stitching thing. If you do any embroidery, if you cross stitch, then you're fully aware of how that works. So it makes for a really cool leaf, very textured. And so that's kind of the neat part about it. And if you're sitting in front of a television, a great thing to be doing while you're maybe watching a particular show. And then I would continue to the next one below, because again, you're always coming in kind of one below where you were. And I'm going to stick back up into this, again, keeping mind of my loops. And then I would come up to the top one on this side. So I'm going to come up over here. And I'm going to stop at this point and kind of share with you kind of how it's looking. And you'll see that everything's kind of jumbly looking. But on the front, it looks really, really cool. And so, again, I'll pull up the finished just so you can kind of see how I stitched on that. But then on the back, you'll note that you can't see that. And so what I had done, we'll just pretend I have finished on this particular one. On the back, I went ahead and you can't put it in truly upside down because these pieces will be opposite. So just turn it upside down, it's fine. Most of the lower section is going to get hidden. And you'll go ahead and glue it on so that the front is pretty and the back is pretty. So if you're stitching, that's kind of how you're going to go. I'm going to set this part aside. And I'm going to share with you another option. And there's actually, I have a couple different options that you can do. One is to take your leaf, just one without the stitching. And so I'll show you again on the dies. I keep mine on magnetic sheets. They do not come this way. Your maple leaf and your oak leaf are two pieces. So if you just want the maple leaf, you have an outline image. That's what I've cut this one from. I took and used the embossing folders, embossed, and then I cut it out. But if you want the stitching, that piece just fits in the inside section and you run it through all at the same time. And that's what comes out like this with those little holes already in it. Okay? I'm going to set that back over and out of the way. So I have a piece, it's not as easy to see here, but you can kind of see it's got texture on it. And it'll give me that same look that I had on the other. The other option you have is to take again, let me just poke out all these little holes. Itsy bitsy little pieces that you'll find all over your floor of your room, but they do pop out really easily. You could use take your pick tool and the pokey end and just poke them out if you don't have a needle handy. Okay, I'll just kind of to keep them because those things do leave little indentions if you press onto them. The other option you've got is to take a marker. You could use one of our Stampin' Write markers while they're still available. They are on our last chance category. But you can just use a marker. I'm using a Sharpie, a fine tip Sharpie. If you want that look of stitching but you don't want to stitch, you can come across and make lines in the areas where you are stitching, but you're not stitching, and get a look of stitching without the effort of needle and thread. You want it a little straighter, you can certainly grab your ruler. They're short distances. I could have gone the other direction on that one, it looks like, but you may end up covering them up anyway, so I'm gonna kind of come here, yeah, like that. And so when you do, see how much faster all that is, because I'm going to finish this one, and the one we've been working on with the stitching I'm going to have to finish after we're done. So, and I think I want to come here. So that gives you some ideas of how you might get stitching with just marker. I have tried doing it with our Stampin' blends and it bleeds enough that I wouldn't recommend it. And then you may or may not decide that you want, again, to have it covered. And I think I would if I was going to do it in this manner. And so I'm going to go ahead. This is the one we're going to use for this purpose. Poke out that little extra little piece. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my glue. And I'm going to come up, and because we can make pretty quick use of this video for this. So I'm going to put a little bit there. You don't need a lot of glue, but you definitely want enough. Now when you're doing it over stitching, you want enough that it's going to not lift. So then I'm just going to take, I don't want to do it that way, come up here, layer them on top of each other. Thankfully this is water-based glue, dries pretty quick, and it does dry clear. And if you get any on your hands, I don't know if you've known this, you can just rub them together. It's just kind of like school glue, which is great. So here is my finished leaf. I'm going to go ahead at this point and I'm going to attach it to the front of my box. So I'm going to see if I can get, my camera's been acting a little weird. See if we can get things to focus a little better. I don't know. So then, because I want to make sure I'm not going higher than I need to go, I found it was easiest to layer my leaf on top upside down. That lets me know kind of where I'm lining things up. And so I can keep my glue only on the sections that are going to touch the box by laying it on there. And you can keep it just a little ways away because it doesn't take a lot of glue to attach. So at this point, I'm going to kind of then turn it over and I can line up like so. You could see where that could give you just the right amount. So, like so. Isn't that cute? But it's kind of boring. So it needed something more. And so what I opted for is I've got a couple options. Because this is red rubber, I don't think I can use it that way. I'm going to grab the stamp that is this acorn. You could use any of them. You could put a leaf on there. You could do the mushroom, but I really liked this cute little acorn. And so I'm going to grab a block, and I'm going to share with you kind of one of the ways I two-toned this with just my ink pads and not a marker, because with us doing away with markers, it's kind of a challenge. So I've got it on the shorter end here, and I'm going to line up so I'm only catching the bottom part, the fruit part basically of my acorn. And I've got it gone a little bit beyond. It's okay. What's more important is when I do the early espresso. So this is pecan pie. And I'm going to grab out early espresso, and I'm going to do the same thing. I want it from this edge. It's easier to line up. And I'm going to line it up to where I can see here. Yes, like so. Because it's a second or so beyond, I'm going to go ahead and breathe on it. And I'm going to stamp. And see how beautiful that ends up turning out? Just using my stamp pads, I get two-toned with my acorn. And so then there's a coordinating die for that. And because I don't want to bring out the big machine, you need the big machine if you're going to use those other dies, the ones that stitch. And you need it if you're using our embossing folder, because it is a big embossing folder. Did I show you the embossing folder? Yes, I did. So then I'm going to grab a little piece of Post-it tape just because I want something. If you don't have Post-it tape, take the top part of a Post-it note. You just want to keep this from shifting around through your machine. So I'm going to grab my mini machine, my mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, and I'm going to line up my plates. I want my number 1. I need a number 2 offset, so I have a little gap in between. It'll feed through my machine that way. If you don't have that little offset, which you can kind of see here, then it doesn't roll through. And then I'm going to push in and I'm going to roll. And I'm going to roll it through. I set my machine out of the way. And you can see I get a little acorn. Turned out really, really cute. I'm going to set that die out of the way so I don't lose it. And then I have a quarter or a ½ inch by about 2 1/8, could be a little shy of 2 1/8 of basic beige. And I'm going to grab my early espresso ink again, and I'm going to grab, there's a stamp in here that says thankful for you, which I thought would be great on a tablescape. And so I'm just going to line up my stamp. Kind of have an idea of how straight I am. Probably should have done that before I inked it, but okay. Not too bad. We'll see how straight we are. We're going to come in here and hope that we did well. You know, not too bad. So then what I've got is a little bit of an overlap on both sides. Let's go ahead and close that pad. We'll clean this in a bit. And I'm going to grab some scissors. You know, we don't have our paper snips anymore, at least not right now. Manufacturer quit making them. So I'm going to come in on one end. Any sharp little pointed scissor will work. I'm going to come in about 1/4 inch on an end, and then I'm going to banner it or flag it by then coming in from the corners up to where I snipped in. And that will give me a flag on one end. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this other end. So, see if we can get my camera to focus. It'd be nice if it was not so blurry. It's all right. Last week I couldn't even get the camera to work, so there's that too. So here we go. So we've got all these pieces, and what I want to do at this point, it's especially important to put this on dimensionals if you are using the stitched section, because it's more bulky. With this being flat, it's not as important. I'm going to grab some mini dimensionals. Maybe we might be grabbing just dimensionals. That works. Okay. So I just a couple of them. Okay. And I'm also going to want a dimensional on the back of that acorn. Okay. So then finish this off. I'm going to come at an angle, like so. The front of my box, and then I want to take my acorn and I'm going to just set it below, overlapping on the one side a little bit. So then I end up having a cute little box this way. So here's my original, the one I started with, that's been stitched, and this one, see if we can get the camera to focus a little better. This one is the one that hasn't been stitched, but on the table looks really pretty good, even just with the Sharpie in black. So at this point, I want to go ahead and share, I want to do one more that's using this stitched piece. And so we're going to grab that, kind of a repeat of how I did this. You can fast forward if you've already seen and don't want to watch again, but I'm going to put this in at 1 inch along the long side, short ends at the top rail. Again, using my score blade, not my cutting blade. Don't want it that way. And then I'm going to start scoring on with the long side at the top rail. I'm going to start scoring at 1 inch, at 3 3/4 of an inch, at 4 3/4 of an inch, and at 7 1/2 inches. And again, those measurements are because of the width of my maple leaf. That's kind of what has determined that. And so then we're going to grab the bone folder. We determined that was the better way to do this. I'm going to fold them along those score lines. Like so. And then I'm going to do the same thing coming in along the base here. So come along. All right, and then it's a matter of snipping again along those lower sections. So I'm going to come here, and this part's going to actually get cut off all the way. This little tab at the end. So we don't need that. Then I'm just going to come in and cut up to that horizontal score line, that horizontal 1 inch. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now you probably could cut this piece off. I decided not to do that. And then those little tabs, I want to make sure I've got a little sliver cut away so that it doesn't bind up when I'm closing my box. So I've got those two pieces here, little slivers of cardstock off of it. You can kind of see that here. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I want this little inner piece to have a section that's away from. Then, again, grab that glue, and I'm going to fold things, making sure those tabs stay on the inside. Okay. And I'm going to put some glue on this piece, again, at the top, side, and bottom, with it kind of pinched together, making sure my fold is here, nice and flat. I can lay it then on the other side, use my finger to press, and then I want to put some adhesive on the side, on the end bottom, and on the other side, and then do the same thing on this one. So it folds across, and I end up with a cute little box. And then, because this one I don't mind seeing the back of, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing I had shared with you before. I'm going to turn it upside down, lay it on my box. I'm going to push this down just a little bit. I'm going to lay it on the top of my box, kind of how I think I want to secure it. And I'm going to know then not to go higher than here with my glue. And I can come up and around and get enough glue to get this secured to the front. And then I can fill in that area just a little bit. Okay. Then it's a matter of me turning it over, and I can line up. If I can get my head in the camera just a second here. I'm going to turn it over. Whoops, I thought I was turning it over. Lay it on there for a second. Now I can flip it over. And then I can slide. I have a little bit of wiggle room if I want to make sure I have it even, which it wasn't quite. So then I have, again, on a more floral looking, because it's not as detailed on the front. And then I can do the same thing on the repeat. So I'm going to grab my paper. We're going to grab the Early Espresso. I stamp my Thankful for You. See if I can line up in the, my background is so close to basic beige. Not too bad. If I didn't like it, like if you weren't so sure you cared for that, I don't know if I can get my camera to come closer. Let's try. See if we can get it a little more in focus. It's acting just a little weird lately. So let's try. If I didn't like the one side, you have two sides to paper. I have shared, a lot of people have said it's like magic. You have two sides. My preference is to say it's like Jesus and you have a second chance. And so I've got it ready to go on the front, and then I want to stamp my greeting, or my acorn. So I'm going to come in being careful where I'm lining up, especially since I have already inked the other side. So I've got my acorn fruit part, and then I want that cap stamped in Early Espresso. Not so bad. And we can clean all of those things up after a bit. I'm going to go ahead and close my ink pads for they don't dry out, and so I don't put something on top of them, because I know me. I don't know about you. And then I'm going to grab that acorn die, line it up. I'll grab my Post-it tape here. Make sure I've got everything lined up. And we'll get ready to assemble box number 2. And then I can share with you all 3. I have an option, and you can see that I have made 2 in pretty short order. They really do not take a long time. Let's get that out of the way. Again, we need just the acorn. All right. And in doing so, we're going to grab my dimensionals. Whoops, I almost skipped across, didn't I? If I don't throw it on the floor, we'll all be good. We almost forgot to tag the ends. So I'm going to come in here. When I'm talking with my Stamp Club girls, it's the same kind of thing. Sometimes I forget things, and they'll remember, and so they remind me. Like so. I want to make sure to point out that if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would be so appreciative if you did. You can do that by clicking on the tab at the bottom of the video, the little bell. You can get notifications every time I have a new video posted. And I try to be on once a week. Sometimes it more, sometimes less, depends on how life is going. But I try to share things, and I'd love to hear your comments. So if you love this, if you make something like this, I'd love to see your projects. And so I'd love for you to post that even on my Facebook page, Just a Little Ink. So it's Facebook.com/Just a Little Ink. So then here's my little acorn on the other side. So here are those 3 boxes. Here's the original one with the stitching. Here's the one that has been markered. And here is the one that, let me pull them up because for some reason, again, that camera is as blurry as I'll get. So here we are, and here we are. So thanks again for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully this next week. Have a blessed day.